Happy opening day, everybody. It is a holiday in Philadelphia, and we are here on PHLY for the Eagles show, talking about opening day and other Eagles nuggets. I'm Zach Berman here with Rich Hofmann, Brenna back home as well. And Rich, you're there. You have the Phillies hat on. What's the buzz back home right now for a big Philly season after a disappointing Eagles season came to a close?
I think people are excited, Zach. You're around here. I know you're in Florida right now, but you know what the deal is, and it is cool on opening day. It is kind of like an Eagle Sunday where everybody is, kind of wearing their Philly stuff. You just see it when you're getting a coffee. Everybody's dressed in red, so we're excited. Nice day outside, pretty windy. I think the pitchers are going to have a better day today, but it's exciting. It's exciting. When you have a good baseball product, it makes the summer so much better. And yeah, I don't know if the Phillies are going to win the World Series. I think they're going to be a pretty good team though. And I think they have established that they can get us to at least the Labor Day, at least the Eagle season. They'll probably get us a little farther than that, honestly, but I'm excited.
Sure, it makes the summer better, but I think what everyone in Philly wants to know is if it's going to make the fall better, and that period of time when the Eagles are rolling and the Phillies are in the postseason, Sixers and Flyers about to start up. It's always a fun time in Philly, but so is right now when even though it's after the season for the Eagles, you have the draft coming up. You just had free agency. Sixers and Flyers are kind of pushing toward the postseason, and the Eagles. And now the Philly season gets going. So we are going to have a Phillies theme to the show, like we said yesterday, where we're going to talk about opening days in Eagles history. We're going to give some Phillies Eagles comps, and then we're going to talk about the stadium complex a bit because Eagles and Phillies are neighbors. This is happening across the street from where the Eagles play. So we will get into that. But before we do that, there has been some news since you and I last spoke. Now, one is player transaction related. One is kind of schedule related, something that I can geek out on, but I think it is relevant for Eagles fans. And the other day, Bo and I were talking about potential changes to the offseason program. And I outlined then why I thought this would be notable. And this just came out a few minutes ago, the Eagles offseason dates. The Eagles will have 7 OTAs. But most notably, they will have mandatory minicamp. That's from June 4th to June 6th. So why is this relevant? Well, this is Nick Sirianni's 4th year, and this is his first time having a mandatory minicamp. They had one scheduled in 2021. That was kind of in the wake of COVID. The offseason program was modified as it was at that point. Nick Sirianni met, there was a period of time there where players weren't sure they were going to come into the facility. Nick Sirianni met with the leaders. That was his first time. They had a modified offseason program that did not include a mandatory minicamp. The past 2 years, the Eagles have elected to go with 6 OTAs, which is well below like what they're allotted to have or what they're allowed to have. And they did not have the mandatory minicamp. So here they are now going into a year where they don't have, or where they have this revamped coaching staff, where they have more time since the season ended compared to last year. And this shows me that Nick Sirianni is not just shuffling the deck chairs. It's not just changing kind of the names on the media guide, if you will, or in the program. He is taking a close look at how they're operating, and they are adding more practices. So I know this is not the type of thing where it kind of moves the needle for news. But if you're trying to figure out, are they doing things differently? That's what stands out to me, Rich.
Yeah, Zach. So I wonder, is it the fact that they have a new coaching staff? They're going to be implementing a lot of new schemes. I also was wondering, is it because the old guys aren't here anymore? Like they scored well on that NFLPA. Nick scored well in terms of just how he treats his players. And I'm sure that has more to do with, interacting in the locker room. But like the fact that they went pretty light on practices, the fact that they have stayed healthy over all these years. What do you think it is? Do you think it's more the coaches?
Yeah, I think it's more the coaches. And that's a good point that you bring up about some of the veteran players. Although I would say I've kind of pointed to that as a reason why they should have more of these off-season programs or off-season practices rather, because it gives them a chance to get the down the roster players more snaps, more meaningful work with the coaches. And I kind of got pushed back when I spoke to people behind the scenes on this, saying like, it's all about being healthy for week one, and there's things you can accomplish without kind of being on the field. But I think that it's beneficial, especially for, let's say, roster spots 40 to 90, to have more OTAs, to have a mandatory mini camp. But I think the impetus here, more than anything else, if I'm being honest, is they're introducing a new offensive scheme. Vic Fangio is adjusting this defensive scheme. He wants to see his personnel. This is an important offseason program. Even last year when the Eagles had coaching changes, Brian Johnson knew all the offensive personnel on the offensive side. They were keeping that intact. Sean Desai, he was a new coordinator, but it was mainly, there were a lot of returning guys on that staff, and the Eagles were really thinking kind of about keeping these guys fresh. I think now this, more than anything else, is about introducing these schemes and getting the sense of the players.
And you might be able to watch a little bit more. You might have a little more content for people in the summer months, right?
Yes. Well, that now you're speaking my language here, because I love that, especially the fact that we're doing a daily show, right? So yes. One of the questions that I had when I took this job was, well, what's May going to look like? What's June going to look like, right? And now we have more practices to talk about, more eyes on them. So it's going to help the PHLY Eagles show as much as anything else. So I appreciate that.
Do you think this is just the start, though, when it comes to how they've looked at the offseason? Because I remember after that Patriots game last year and kind of them starting sloppy and just not being, completely on the same page, there was some talk of, Sirianni saying like, yeah, we might have to look at how we do training camp and preseason and how we handle those things as well. Great question.
I think preseason is what they're going to look hard at. I don't think they're going to tackle to the ground in training camp. It would surprise me if that changes. I think that in the preseason, you might see these guys playing more, but there is a balancing act, if you will, because the Eagles also want to be very close to their vest in terms of what they show, right? So even though you never had, you always keep it vanilla in August, they don't want to show you much in terms of personnel. So I do think they are going to make adjustments there after the way they started last season. But I think, like, at least for now, the big change, of course, is the offseason program. And then when the Eagles returned to the offseason program, there's going to be a competition for the number 3 wide receiver spot. And we spoke about Paris Campbell the other day, but news coming out yesterday that Alamedy Zacchaeus, your fellow St. Joe's Prep alum,
I know they're gone. Him and Swift.
Yeah,
no more.
They're not keeping OZ. Quez Watkins left this week too to Pittsburgh. Alamedy Zacchaeus going down to Washington, where apparently Brian Johnson has some juice, right? Bringing in Mariota, bringing in OZ. Your read on this, and then I'll give my OZ thoughts. But knowing that he's not here, knowing they are going to have changes at the 3rd wide receiver spot, what jumped out to you?
2 quick thoughts, because you mentioned part of it on Twitter. I just didn't understand last year why he didn't play more. Like, I know there was probably some, like, didn't Nick a couple of times point out that he was not running the clear out route correctly, fast enough? There seemed to be some sort of frustration, which obviously me just watching it on TV, I'm not like paying attention to that as much. But compared to Quez, like, that guy would make a contested catch every once in a while, Zach. And I do think, like, if they brought him back as the 3rd receiver, I would not have said this is like time to panic. I think he could have handled that job, but maybe the Eagles felt differently. And because OZ is now gone, and because Quez is also off to Pittsburgh, I do think, like, we need to start brushing up on, what do you think, 2nd round receivers, 3rd round receivers? It seems like on a team that, look, we can argue about the Eagles' needs and like what positions they need to fill. They have tried to fill a lot of those areas in free agency. Time will tell if they're actually good solutions to some of those players, like the Devin Whites of the world. But wide receiver 3, I would say, is pretty high up there on the list. So I guess I'm looking towards the draft. I think they're going to need another guy to fill that spot.
Yeah. So a few things there. First off, I agree with you. Like, I thought OZ should have played more last year. Now, you were right. There was some frustration early on. It was a specific play, but then also Sirianni kept saying someone with kind of his toughness, who plays the way he plays has a role on Sirianni's team. I think the Eagles were looking for more of a dynamic threat from that third receiver spot, which runs counter to them signing Julio Jones, of course. As if Bo's watching this in like Magic Kingdom right now or something, he's saying, ZB, what's going, you always talk up Julio Jones, right? So yeah, I get that. They didn't get that from Julio, of course.
He's got this fired up on Space Mountain right now, you're saying?
Yeah, seriously. I don't anticipate Bo doing that. Yeah.
You might do that.
I'm a bit more of a nerd than he is. So the OZ thing, he had 2 touchdowns, I think, on like 10 catches, right? So, I said going into the year, his ADOT, which geeking out here, average depth of target, right, was higher than one would think. People always thought he was kind of like an underneath guy, but yeah, I do think the Eagles wanted more dynamic. They wanted more of a dynamic threat there. They do like Paris Campbell, but I've been on this train all along about them drafting a wide receiver in the second round. And, Bo and I have had some healthy disagreement about it, and we'll kind of see how it comes leading up to the draft. I'll say this. This is a loaded receiver class, absolutely loaded. You're going to find a wide receiver in the second round like a Troy Franklin type from Oregon, for instance, who has like, late first round potential. There are guys like I'd say Ricky Purcell from Florida, Lad McConkey from Georgia, who will probably be gone by then, who, like, if you're looking for a specific role, could really help you there. If you're looking, there are deep threats there. Going into the combine, there was talk about someone like Xavier Worthy maybe being available in the second round with the way he ran. I don't think that happens, but someone like Xavier Legette from South Carolina could be there. This is all a way of saying the Eagles have 2 second-round picks. There's talented receivers there. It would be ambitious at best, and it would be ambitious at best to expect Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown to continue playing 17 games. Those guys have been remarkably healthy for the Eagles, but you saw – I shouldn't say ambitious at best. It would be ambitious. More specifically, though, you saw in Week 18 last year when Devontae's not there, how it affects the offense. You saw in the playoffs when A.J. Brown's not there, how it affects the offense. So the third receiver, in addition to having that role, you're going to need someone who can step in if one of those guys goes down. And then when you think long-term, and we're not there yet, I get that. We're not there yet. We talked about this in yesterday's show. But when the Eagles pay Devontae, then A.J. Brown, when he's up for a new deal, right, they're going to have some difficult things they're encountering. So when you say, all right, the third year of the second-round picks rookie deal, is he a starting receiver for you? The fourth year, is he a starting receiver for you? If he's a third receiver, he's a starting receiver. But even then, he might be a top 2 receiver for you. So this is a way of saying I would think that the Eagles can and should maximize this draft class.
Well, yeah, it fills a need for this current year, but it also gives you, the Sam Hinkie word, optionality moving forward, right? Yep. If you can't pay both AJ and Devontae moving forward, like if this player, pops, he turns into a good, starting level receiver, which is very possible if you take somebody in the second round, right? AJ Brown, second round pick, right? That does happen. Yeah. So I do think they're probably going to need to take a receiver, and I would like to see it by round 2, I think that's going to be an important part. But yeah, like OZ, he made that catch against the Bills last year. And I think my main reaction to that, Zach, was, oh my God, Quez wouldn't have even come close to making that catch. That was unbelievable. I kind of wish it felt like some of the film grinders, and look, the Eagles coaches and Jalen Hurts, they know more about what is going on than everybody from the outside, but they were pointing out, like, hey, sometimes OZ was open on some of these routes, and like Jalen just was not really looking this way. So, maybe finding a guy that Jalen says, okay, I'm good throwing the ball to him every once in a while would be nice. But like, look, third wide receiver, if that's one of your biggest needs for this current season going into the draft, I think that is both, that's a good thing roster wise. And it's also something that you can accomplish. Like you can find a guy who can come in and contribute at a decent level right away.
And I should mention too, the wide receiver 3 is probably the 5th option in the passing game, because you have AJ, Devontae, Dallas Goedert, and Saquon, who I expect to have a role in the passing game too. One last thing on this, the St. Joe's Prep Alumni Association can't be particularly
They just
happy
prep
about how the
right over there.
Yeah, yeah, for me, right up there, right? Can't they can't be thrilled about how this offseason program has, or I'm sorry, how this offseason calendar has gone for the Eagles. Last year must have been so fun when those two guys were coming out from your high school.
I was loving it. Yeah. I mean, Joe Buck was mentioning that they both went there and there were stories about it. And yeah, they played on the same team together, OZ and Swift. So yeah, but like, look, let's be real. It might have been our fault. That wasn't a great year when they both came aboard. So, changing things up. John Runyon is now on the Giants too. John Runyon Jr., I should say.
Yep.
So yeah, I guess we're going to have to wait for, Marvin Harrison.
Jeremiah Trotter Jr., Marvin Harrison Jr. Yeah, they're not getting Marvin Harrison Jr., but Jeremiah Trotter Jr. would get some excitement in the city.
The prep, their football team is like, I don't know, Zach, this is like a hot take. I kind of wish they would go back to when you and I were in high school, kind of around that time when they were good. They were the best team in the area. This is like a joke how good they are now. They're getting kids from all over the place. They're playing like IMG Academy and playing like good games against them. So if they continue to have a program that kind of works on this sort of nationally competitive level, the Eagles are probably going to have a few more shots. I will say though, like when those teams play in like the PIAA against like public schools, I know those public schools are not happy that they have to play against the prep because those games are usually not very close.
I hear you there. Although I wish it happened like 7 years ago, because during my time at the Inquirer, I was responsible for writing about all the local players. So when you're doing draft previews and you got the best wide receiver in the draft, like Marvin Harrison Jr., there was Will Fuller at one point. Jalen Strong was a 3rd round pick, but the amount of high level players that the prep's putting out, you're right. For a high school football fan, the competitive balance isn't there. For an NFL fan, and just like to give a little Philly flavor, I think it's pretty cool. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. I'm just, it's funny kind of at the high school level, but yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome that all these kids, most of them seem like really, nice, cool kids kind of growing up. I love what I've seen from Jeremiah Trotter Jr., in part because of the prep, in part because of kind of the interplay between him and his dad as well. But yeah, it is cool. It's basically one-stop shopping at this point though, Zach. The good players, you just got to go to 17th and Girard. You'll find them there.
It makes the local pro day easier. So in a minute, we're going to get to the first Phillies game and some first Eagles games. But before we do that, let me tell you about the first time that I'm telling you about my friends at TrueMark Financial Credit Union. Because some friends of mine recently joined TrueMark Financial Credit Union right here in Philly. And it's been eye-opening to see the difference between banking at a bank and becoming a member of a credit union. When you join a credit union like TrueMark Financial, you become a part owner, which means profits come back to you instead of going to shareholders. TrueMark Financial has better rates, lower fees, and a better return of savings and more flexible options overall. And of course, the same digital tools and technology that we all want. But the best part for me is that TrueMark Financial is local. They're headquartered in Fort Washington, and with 24 branches across the Philly area, they are deeply rooted in our community. They serve our community and only our community. So their investments and programs help our people right here at home. Becoming a member of a credit union has so many benefits over being a customer at a bank. It's a total no-brainer. Head over to truemark.com/PHLY to learn more or find a branch near you. That's truemark.com/PHLY, federally insured by the NCUA. And then while we're talking about this, I also need to mention our friends at Empire Today, because with Empire Today, you get to shop at home convenience, the right products for your needs, quick and professional installation, and a price match guarantee. Empire Today is the best place to get new flooring. So, of course, they have copycats, but those copycats can't beat Empire Today on quality, service, speed. So they advertise low-quality products that Empire Today simply does not carry. Empire Today won't promise you the lowest prices. If they did that, you're not getting the flooring in your home that Empire Today wouldn't put in theirs. So with Empire Today, you're getting what you need and it won't overwhelm you with thousands of choices and substitutes. What they leave out of the selection is what's as important as what is in the selection. Empire's product team exhaustively combs through thousands of product samples each year to find the perfect styles for you. They have a virtual floor designer. They pride themselves on convenient shop-at-home service. And the great thing, too, is they service their own warranties. So if an issue does arise, just call Empire. They service all the warranties themselves. You won't have to track down a manufacturer's phone number. Schedule a free home estimate today. All listeners can receive a $350 off discount when they use the promo code PHLY. Restrictions apply. See empiretoday.com/PHLY for details. So as we said, opening day, and Phillies opening day, it's significant for like the pomp and the circumstance. Every player goes out and they're introduced, right? But it's one of 162. If the Phillies win today, the Phillies lose today, it doesn't shape the season. NFL opening days are a little different because you really kind of get a sense of how the season can go sometimes by that opening today. So I ask you, and we can go back and forth about memorable Eagles opening days. And we'll say recent history because I wasn't going back to like 1960 when I was pulling this one up.
No, I wasn't at Franklin Field for that one. So I think the point you just made, though, Zach, is something that looking back at the last few decades of opening days, look, I don't know if this is completely hindsight, but the opener really sometimes can tell you what is coming down the pike. Like last year, okay, we didn't know the defense was going to crater to the level that it did, but that was a close game against a bad team. Mac Jones got going, kind of throwing over the middle in the second half of that game. The execution down the stretch was sloppy. They didn't convert on the fourth down. I remember it did kind of show that okay, this is not going to be as smooth of a ride as last year. Okay. And there are plenty of other examples, and we'll get to that. So if you're asking me, though, the most memorable Eagles opener, for some reason, I just go back to 2013. And I still think the chip era starting on Monday Night Football against Washington. Washington had just won the NFC East the year before. That's one of my favorite games. And really, Zach, it was the first two drives that stood out to me. They get the ball. They go a million miles an hour in a way I don't think we've ever seen an NFL team go. And they march right down the field. But then I believe it was D'Angelo Hall. It was like a weird lateral play. He runs it back. It was kind of like Vic, the ball got deflected or something like that. I have never seen a flukier, less deserved touchdown. And it should have really taken, all of the momentum away from the Eagles after this great drive. They get the ball right back after scoop and score, and they just keep moving the ball up and down the field. Vic looks amazing. Deshaun looks dynamic. Shady looks great. And, I just remember thinking, is football changed now? Are the Eagles, is every team going to look like the Eagles right now? And the answer is no, not exactly. And I think the Eagles definitely changed over the chip era as well. But in terms of just how much fun that game was, it was such a delight. Obviously the Eagles winning the game was important as well, but it did go to show that that first year, really the first year of the chip era, 2013, for a team that did not win a playoff game, that was so much fun watching that team.
Yeah, I'm going to quote Jason Kelce here because if Jason Kelce was on, he might mention that. This was from his speech, which we all have seen by now. I won't forget Chip Kelly's first game as Eagles head coach against the Washington Redskins. We ran close to 50 plays in the first half. We were so tired, but it didn't matter because they couldn't stop us. The NFL had never seen something like this before. I remember all of us thinking after the game, this is going to change the NFL. So did it change the NFL? Maybe not necessarily, but what it did, it seemed like a revolution. I've heard the expression, the revolution of the NFL is being televised here. It was Monday Night Football. They ran 53 plays, I think was the exact number, in the first half. And they were just playing at a pace that was totally different. And it was the players were exhausted, but it was special to watch, and I have actually in my home, I have a blown up poster of the front page of the Inquirer sports section from the Tuesday after that game. I wrote the game story, and I remember driving back from Landover then thinking like, this is going to work, right? The NFL hasn't seen something like this before. And things change thereafter, and we'll kind of get to that in these openers. But I am with you there. When I think about the opening day, like that signal to the league that something was different with the Eagles.
Well, and it was on Monday Night Football too. Everybody in the country was watching the Eagles play this just totally new brand of football. It was so exciting. And also, frankly, coming off that 2012 season when they were just dreadful, by December, they were just kind of playing out the string. Like it was so refreshing to watch. Let me ask you last thing on this. Cause I do remember, a lot of the talking points after the game had to do with, can the players do this over 16 games? Like, can they make it to the playoffs playing this speed, specifically the big guys, specifically the offensive linemen? Was there any sense that this was coming? I don't really remember the training camp quite as well. Did you? I know this probably hit you by surprise to a certain degree, but were there any, from the preseason or training camp, was there any hint that something like this was coming?
Yes. Now, to that degree, no, but everything they did was different. Now, you have to remember, too, that point, Philadelphia had 14 years of Andy Reid, right? And the personnel changed, but things were kind of what they were with Andy Reid. They were run the same way. Practices, everything was kind of run the same way. So now they come out. I remember a big deal was music, right? The Eagles had music during practice. Yeah. And we're putting a playlist together. Everything was fast. There were times like in Andy Reid practices where the whole team was kind of standing around watching the, just the 11-on-11s, right? Or the 7-on-7s. This year, they had different things going at different fields. Like it was drill to drill. Practice looked different. They weren't huddling. I remember Chip Kelly called huddling a committee meeting or something of that nature. So the way it looked, I didn't expect it to kind of look like that in the first game, but I knew it was going to be different.
Yeah, I think I look more fondly on the Chip era now that we have more space from it. Like he gave us one great year, he gave us one average year. I mean, they were 10-6. That's an unlucky to not make the playoffs that year, even if I don't think, whether it was Sanchez or I forget if Foles was even available at that point.
Foles got hurt. Sanchez came in. Yeah.
Yeah. So they probably weren't going to make too much noise in the playoffs. And then the third year was a complete disaster and it was all Chip's fault. So, it evened out. But that first year was great. And I think there are probably two openers that stood out to me the most just of my lifetime being an Eagles fan. And that was one of them. I'm curious if you can come up with the other one, though.
From your lifetime here. So I have my list in front of me, and I'm guessing yours is the second one on my list, which is the 2000 Eagles, the pickle juice game. Okay, yeah. So real quick, the pickle juice game for our younger audience. This was Andy Reid's second year as head coach. They were down in Dallas. It was 109 degrees that day. On the field, it was 130 degrees. The Eagles opened the game with a surprise kickoff. With a surprise onside kick, which you won't see anymore. So that was one part of this. But the other part of it was so hot that Rick Burkhalter, the team trainer, had the players drinking pickle juice. And they made a big deal about it on the sideline. And it's forever known now as the pickle juice game. The Eagles dominated that game. 42-something was the score. And they went on to make the playoffs that year.
I actually watched a YouTube video of the pickle juice game this morning, Zach, in prep for this pod. Don't say I don't prep for this pod, everybody.
I would not dare.
So I obviously remember the onside kick was great, like just a very bold move. Do you remember, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years later, they also tried a surprise onside kick in Dallas, and the Dallas guy ran the surprise onside kick back for a touchdown on the first play of the game. I wish, well, look, I did some research. I didn't do all of the research, but I'm pretty sure that's true in 2003. But yeah, I just remember thinking like, man, what a bold play. And it just felt like the Eagles had arrived. Andy had his first year where, Donovan gets his feet wet, but Donovan comes in and now it's like, okay, we're the best team in the NFC East. And I remember great Deuce Staley game, Deuce just running wild on the Dallas Cowboys. But in watching the video of the highlights of that game, there were two things that stood out to me. Number one, the whoever the sideline reporter was, it was Madden and Summerall were calling the game, but I apologize, I don't know who the gentleman was who was the sideline reporter. He called the pickle juice before the fake onside kick, before the Eagles kind of ran wild over Dallas. He was like, by the way, the Eagles are drinking this pickle juice right now, and they say it hydrates them. And at one point he says, frankly, like the science doesn't completely support this, like, but the Eagles say it works. So we're going to go with it. And then the other thing that stood out to me, Donovan ran in a touchdown at the end of the game. And I just forgot, like, what an unbelievable athlete Donovan McNabb was early in his career. Wasn't as good of a passer, certainly developed and probably became a better overall quarterback later in his career, but he scores, and Zach, he dunks the football in his pads over the goalpost after he scores. And I've seen other players do that and, get close. Like, he was way over the bar. So it was just kind of wild to see, because when I often think of Donovan, I think of a little bit more of the heavier Donovan, kind of gingerly rolling out to his right with a big pocket and letting it loose kind of later in his career from, 2004 to 2009 kind of era. But yeah, I mean, what a crazy athlete. So that was so much fun. And obviously, like, the two top games, two huge wins over division rivals, right? Like when you win and you basically just kind of embarrass a division rival in their own building, that's going to make it sweeter.
Yeah, I think people forget sometimes with Donovan that he was a college basketball player at Syracuse, was a member of a Final Four team, right? So his numbers, his rushing numbers early in his career were awesome. Like he wasn't Mike Vick, but he was one of the best running quarterbacks in the NFL for a long period of time. Now
I remember, he like broke some ankles a couple times too earlier in his career too. Like
against Washington, he had a famous run where he did that. Yep.
Okay, good. I was hoping you would say that.
So do you want my next few openers, or are there openers you want to get to?
I will get to the next one, Zach, and I'm going to say two just because they're basically the same game in my opinion, and they are 18 years apart. And that is the 2004 opener and the 2022 opener. And the reason I say they are
on my list, I like that.
The reason I think they are the same type of games, even if one of them was at home and the other one was on the road, it was just the holy crap. We just got one of the best receivers in the game.
Okay.
And this guy is making an insane impact right away. And, the first one, obviously T.O. against the Giants, catches 3 touchdowns. He's flexing in the end zone. That was obviously the T.O. honeymoon phase that first year where, what was the bet? Did he have a bet that Andy would,
something with the tights?
You'd have to wear tights or something like that. And
he would be allowed to wear tights in practice or something of that nature.
Yeah. So look, that was such a fun game. And I just remember thinking after having, no offense to these guys, because I think Pinkston was still on the team, Todd Pinkston and James Thrash, it just was a different level with this type of dynamic receiver. I just remember those Eagles teams were great in the early 2000s, but I felt like their offense, I would watch a lot of the games with my uncle, Zach, actually, my uncle Pat, who from the Daily News. I would watch a lot of the games with him, and he would be freaking out because they would throw balls to James Thrash and have him try and shake a cornerback one-on-one, and he would get 2 yards every time. And those teams were great, but they obviously did not have that dynamic receiving threat. T.O. was that guy. And then 2022, and again, both years they make the Super Bowl. They get A.J. Brown, and they play this kind of ridiculous up and down game against the Lions. But Jalen is just throwing slant after slant, and then he throws a couple of deep balls to A.J., and you're just looking, and I said, man, Devontae Smith, I'm so excited about him, but this guy right now is on a slightly different level, and it just was it was really exciting. So those games kind of reminded me a little bit of each other.
Okay, yeah, I see that there, and I can tell you specifically covering that 2022 game in Detroit that you definitely felt that way, right? You were like, man, this offense, and Devontae didn't have a single catch that game, and AJ was just special, and he's been that ever since. And I always remind Eagles fans, like when there's any type of critical talk about AJ Brown, do you remember what this looked like before he got here? Like everything changes when you have a player like that. And he has certainly done that. So I'll give you two now, and then we'll compare our fifth thereafter. But two that jumped to my mind because those are different than what I had was 2016, Carson's first game, and
Sure.
they beat the Browns. It's at home. And so this is interesting because Carson wasn't supposed to be the starter week one, right? Teddy Bridgewater gets hurt a week, 2 weeks before the season, a week and a half before the season. The Eagles trade Sam Bradford on cutdown day. Carson Wentz is out hunting that morning and gets a call that he's now the starting quarterback. And even though the Eagles gave up all of this for Carson Wentz, Eagles fans really didn't see much of him. He got hurt in his first preseason game. I believe it was against Tampa. And so he did not play the rest of the preseason. And here he is. And so it's kind of this it's the first time Eagles fans are really seeing Carson. And it's Doug Peterson's first game. And they're playing against the Browns who aren't particularly good. They were starting RG3 that game. And like Carson and Jordan Matthews were connecting on these touchdowns. They were throwing this slot fade. And it was like, man, do they have a quarterback here? Right. I mean, they gave up all of this to get Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz wasn't the type of quarterback who Eagles fans were watching on TV on Saturdays. Right. I mean, it's not as if you're taking Jaden Daniels, who won the Heisman Trophy or something like that. Like you're taking a guy from North Dakota State. And he just looked special that day. And it led to, 2016, he was good, kind of slowed down a bit. They clearly needed receiving help. 2017 was incredible. But that was a particularly memorable season opener. And then the other one that I'll throw in here too, before I get to my last one, was 1999, Andy Reid's first game. And what jumps out here, they lost. It was at home. 25-24 was the loss. And there was a play down the left sideline to Brian Finneran. And he didn't catch the pass.
Villanova's finest.
Yeah. And then they ended up cutting Finneran. I mean, whether, causation, correlation, history has a way of kind of modifying that, if you will. But the reality is that was memorable because it was the first game of Andy and they didn't start McNabb. They would get McNabb in here and there. But it was rough going early on, but I remember the Brian Finneran thing specifically when I think of opening days.
Yeah, that was a little bit. I don't remember that. Zach, if I remember correctly, that game might have been blacked out locally. That might have been the era where the Eagles couldn't fill the stadium and you had to listen to some of the games on the radio. That was at the Cardinals, Jake Plummer.
Yes. No. I'm sorry. That was, yeah. I'm correct. That was the Cardinals, Jake Plummer. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which was so weird when the Cardinals were in the NFC East. You had all of these classic rivals and then a team in Arizona for some reason playing in the NFC East.
Yeah, it was a good trip for the writers, that's for sure.
Totally.
Your last memorable preseason game, and then we'll get into some quick Phillies Eagles talk before we talk about the stadium.
Yeah. So, and look, Zach, there are a bunch, but for some reason, this one stands out. Because look, it's what we talked about earlier. It was a sign of things to come for the season. And that is the 2010 opener against the Green Bay Packers. The Eagles are wearing the Kelly green jerseys. And it was the start of the Kevin Kolb era. It was also the end of the Kevin Kolb era, unfortunately for him. He gets a concussion early on in the game and Mike Vick comes in. And Zach, I just remember thinking my expectations were not that high for Vic at this point. He had been used as kind of a gadget player the year before. They got him into some blowouts, but Donovan was the quarterback the previous season, although Vic was a major storyline just coming out of prison and the Eagles were the ones who signed him. And, I remember that training camp was it was kind of a media circus, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
But I just remember Vic comes into that game after Kolb gets hurt, Zach. And he is just shot out of an absolute cannon. He was flying and the Eagles were getting dominated to that point. And of course they end up losing to the Packers in the wild card round as well. But he was just obviously he looked so cool because he had the Kelly green jersey on too, but Vic drags them back into that game basically with just his athleticism. And it's funny because he took so many big hits that year. He was so good that entire year. But the by the end of the year, you could just see like he was moving differently because of all of those big hits. But when you first got him, in that Packers game, I believe they played the Lions the next week, and Andy made the decision, like, I liked what I saw from this guy. I want him to be the starting quarterback. And Vic took the job, and he never relinquished it that season. But by the end of it, he was pretty beat up. And as you know, like Mike Vick, when he's walking around the NovaCare complex, not a huge guy.
Sure.
And so for somebody,
although that's relative, but yeah.
Yeah, that is relative. Yeah, like just
yeah,
fair enough. Bigger than both of us.
Yeah.
But for somebody who's, just like 6 feet, average kind of build, for him to be taking the shots he did, and of course we know he never slid. It took a big toll on him. But anyway, that first game, even though they lost, it turned out to be kind of a sign of things to come, that Mike Vick was going to have this incredible season.
Yeah, I remember monitoring that game. I was covering the Giants at the time, so I was not able to watch it as intensely as people in Philly were. But you're absolutely right. And then all of that happened that day with Stuart Bradley and Kevin Cobb, Leonard
Yes.
Weaver. There were a lot of injuries there. The last one for me is 2015. So I talked about the beginning of the chip era. Here's the end of the chip era. They were down in Atlanta. It was also a Monday night game. Sam Bradford, DeMarco Murray, right? Big year for the Eagles. They just got rid of LaShawn. They're down 23 at halftime. DeMarco Murray had 8 carries for 9 yards in that game. Byron Maxwell, their high price signing, couldn't stop Julio Jones. Now, I want to remind everyone, a lot of people can't stop Julio Jones. He's a really good player. But the reality is like when you saw that day, you're like, man, this might not work. This is not the same team from 2013. The offense was different. They weren't as creative, and the warning signs that were apparent that day came to fruition that year.
Yep. Another perfect example of what you saw in the first game is kind of what you saw the rest of the year. The offense was not moving quite as easily. And Zach, the thing I remember, the hype for that game was through the roof, because in the preseason, Chip basically viewed the preseason much differently than Nick Sirianni does now. Like that third game at Green Bay, I think Bradford, it was 21-0 in the first quarter when they took everybody out. It looked unbelievable. They're throwing the Sproles. It's just, I remember I was down at the Jersey Shore watching the game with some of my friends, and we were like, oh my gosh, this is the year. And then they get into a real game, and you saw kind of what a slog it would be for the rest of the year.
There you go. So on in a minute here, we're going to kind of go through some Eagles Phillies comparisons. But before we do, let me tell you, we know it's opening day. Spring is in the air. It's also the spring home buying market. And that's where you got to call our friends at Mortgage CS. Mortgage CS offers refinancing options, including rate and term refinances for a rate payment reduction or cash out refinances that tap into home equity, making it a smart choice for those with high interest debt or funding home projects or education. Mortgage CS, it stands for Mortgage Concierge Service. That's what the C and the S are for, concierge service. They have white glove service, and Mortgage CS is an independent mortgage broker based right in Philly. They give full control. So you have full control of the lenders that they work with. They're available 24/7. They're licensed coast to coast in California, Colorado, DC, Delaware, Florida, in Massachusetts, Maryland, New Jersey, in PA, South Carolina, Virginia, and Washington. So don't forget to spread the word to friends and family in those areas. And they educate and empower their clients. They help their clients obtain ultra competitive rates, and they have exceptional customer service with 24/7 availability with their 2 owners, Alec and Ben. There's tons of easy to use tools to make the mortgage process more approachable. When you hear the word mortgage, think of Mortgage CS. Think of Ben and Alec. Save Ben's telephone number 267-391-7425 to your phone. Email Ben at email Ben at mortgagecs.com. Call, text Ben at any time, day or night. You can even talk opening day with him. Check out mortgagecs.com/PHLY to get started. This advertisement is not a commitment to lend or extend credit. Mortgage CS is an equal housing opportunity mortgage broker. All loans are subject to credit approval. Certain restrictions may apply. Company NMLS ID number 1464766. Visit morgancs.com for more information. And when you're all watching the Phillies game, you're getting together with your friends, you all know what you're going to do. You're going to have some Miller Lite because a lot's changed over the years. One thing that hasn't, that great taste of Miller Lite on opening day. It was the original light beer, and to this day, it's still the best one. Miller Lite has more of the taste that you want and less of the stuff you don't. The great thing about Miller Lite, in addition to the taste, is the experience. You think about those moments in life that matter most, and Miller Lite is often there with you. You're making conversation, you're bonding with friends, you're watching a ball game. You have the Miller Lite there. Do you spend less time thinking about what you're drinking and more time drinking with your friends? Miller Lite is the quality and the substance. It's not fake and flashy, so it's perfect for Philadelphia. Miller Lite keeps it simple. Undebatable quality, great taste, only 96 calories. It's the beer that strips away everything you don't need and holds on to what matters most. A light beer that tastes like beer, less filling, and only 96 calories. The original light beer since 1975. Times change, but you can always enjoy the great taste of Miller Lite. Tastes like Miller time. To get Miller Lite delivered right to your door, visit MillerLite.com/PHLY Birds, or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beers. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 96 calories per 12 ounces. So I do want to make sure we get some stadium talk in, because I think it's an interesting quality or an interesting conversation. We don't have to spend too much time on this, but I always like to think, these players have a certain persona in this town. It's not just kind of the product on the field, but it's kind of like who they are, how they represent themselves, the reputation in the fan base. So we kind of made a list of some of the high profile players on the Phillies. I'm curious which ones would be your Eagles comp, and you don't have to go through all of them, but maybe pick like 3 or 4 that jump to mind for. All right, this is like the Eagles version of Bryce Harper. This is the Eagles version of Aaron Nola, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a few I have, Zach. So one that stood out to me was Trey Turner, who, I was at one of the playoff games last year, and he did one of those. Have you ever seen one of those cool Trey Turner slides where he basically glides and he just kind of touches home plate, or he slides into third base? Watching him run the bases, first off, like watching him run the bases compared to, say, Kyle Schwarber is pretty jarring, the difference between the two of them. But he's cool. I can't really say it any other way. It's like aesthetically pleasing to watch him run the bases. And I know Trey had that prolonged slump last year, so I'm not comparing him to this player in that way, but just from like, it's fun to watch him play. He reminds me of Devontae Smith a little bit, just like another really smooth runner, just fun to watch him get open. And when he is succeeding, when he is making plays, obviously both of them excellent players, it's just fun to watch. So that would be my first one.
Okay. Real quick here. I just want to add this in a few seconds. Too late, but thanks for the chat for bringing this up to me. Is I just need to give a quick disclaimer that times change, but you can always enjoy the great taste of Miller Lite. Tastes like Miller time. To get Miller Lite delivered right to your door, visit MillerLite.com/PHLY Birds, or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 96 calories per 12 ounces. I'm not sure if I said that the first time or not, but I saw it in the chat, and I just want to make sure I got that out there. So I hear what you're saying. He does have that smooth quality to him, Trey Turner, but so that's a good comparison. I actually, though, went with a different wide receiver for Trey, and I went with AJ Brown, because they both arrived here like at the top of their game. They're both high profile additions, meant to kind of bring a good team to a higher level. And they both make for talk radio fodder, if you will, in their own respective ways. But you can make an argument, and I've made this argument, that like Trey Turner is one of the elite players in baseball. When the Phillies signed him, I was like, they got their guy. Like this is Trey Turner is so much fun to watch, and I'd say that's about AJ Brown. AJ Brown's on a Hall of Fame trajectory. So, all right, I like your Devontae comparison. Which one do you have next here?
So I have another one, and again, like this is not exactly this player is as good as this player. This player is the exact same type of guy. So bear with me here, Zach. JT Realmuto, he reminds me Jason Kelce a little bit. And it's in this sense because Kelce's a much better player than Real Muto. I think obviously much more beloved than JT is. JT is I find him to be wildly frustrating at the plate a lot of the time. But they are team leaders that have to do the grunt work. And one of the best things that JT did, do you remember the video? This was like 2 or 3 years ago. The terrible relief pitcher comes sprinting out of the bullpen, and he's like not very good, and he's sprinting, and he's on the mound, and he's still gassed because he's like trying to be Usain Bolt coming out of the pen. And JT takes one look at him, and the camera focuses on him, and he just gives this look like, oh my God, this guy, like this is going to be terrible.
It's become a meme.
Yeah, it has become a meme. Anyway, from that exact moment, I remember sometimes I go back to the Phillies celebrations when they advance around or when they won the National League. Like, as a lot of the other players are piling up on each other, JT's just like quietly taking off the shin pads. He's talking to Topper, and it's not like he isn't happy. He's just like, I think catching takes a lot out of you, Zach. Like, I think the fact that you have to be so locked in on every pitch, the fact that you probably get the ball fouled off you 4 times a game, those type of things. And I think it's just like a quiet exhale. We got out of that. It reminds me of Jason Kelce after the tush push, man. Like, he would get up from the pile and just be like, man, that was pretty exhausting. So in that sense, that they are very good players and they have to do kind of the unsung work. They get their bodies beat up quite a bit. I saw some similarities between those two.
Okay. I actually went with Devontae for JT for the reasons that you mentioned. Like, he's not the most demonstrative, but he's almost like the ball player, right? You talk to the players on the Phillies and you say, who's the guy in here who like you really respect, who's like the guy on the team. And that's kind of how it is with Devontae. Devontae he's not overly flashy. He's just he's so efficient. He's so effective, and everyone respects the heck out of him. So that's who I would go with there.
I want to know who the player equivalent of the Fanatic is. I think that's also Kelce in other ways, probably.
Okay.
So I have a couple more, Zach. So Bryce Harper, you mentioned him. Who was the guy that you had for him?
Yeah, I went Jason Kelce, and I know people in the chat were saying Jalen Hurts, but to me, like, Bryce Harper, one of the endearing things about him is like the appreciation for Philadelphia. And you could say it's pandering, but it seems genuine. Like, he chose to sign here. Now, they offered him a lot of money to sign here, but he's Bryce. He's like a superstar who picked Philly, and he kind of loves being part of the fabric of the city. I saw what he came to the stadium in today, and that, to me, more than anything else, is Jason Kelce. Like, Jason Kelce's an elite player, of course, but he also, like, he loves playing in Philadelphia. So that's why I compared those two.
Yeah, for Harper, I was thinking about putting Kelce there for the same exact reason, the off-field stuff. On the field, though, I actually had AJ Brown for him because I just think AJ Brown, like Bryce Harper, is the best player on the team, right? And he's the guy who could take over, and he's the guy at certain points where you're like, man, we just have the best guy on the field and just throw him the ball, and he's going to make the big plays. So that's where I went for him. I have one more, and it's a specific year for the Eagles player. So Zach Wheeler, I think, is 2022 Jalen Hurts, because I just think Zach Wheeler quietly goes about his business. Like, a couple weeks ago, he signs that huge contract and he talks about, my wife is from here or from around here. We get to see her family a lot of the time. That's a big deal. And I remember thinking, like, man, I don't think I had ever heard this. And frankly, I don't think I had ever heard Zach Wheeler speak. And as somebody who like pays attention a lot to the media aspect of all of these Philadelphia sports, it just struck me of, oh man, this guy's been great for 4 years here. And I just don't know a ton about him. I thoroughly enjoy watching him. It's kind of like Jalen, right? Jalen, a little more of a private guy. He is a quiet sort of leader. Doesn't work perfectly because the quarterback certainly has to have more of a leadership aspect to him than just one starting pitcher who pitches once every 5 days. But yeah.
All right, that is a good one there. I'm going to give you two real quick here because I do want to get to the stadium conversation. Nick Castellanos and Darius Slay, both like really valuable players. Both kind of frustrate the fan base sometimes in their own way. Both will say things sometimes that like will crack you up. Some say things sometimes that will make you laugh. But or that will kind of make you scratch your head. But I got Slay and Nick Castellanos. And then my last one here is Jose Alvarado and Jordan Mailata. Just like lovable big guys who are gonna who are gonna fill it up for you. So those are the two that I went with there.
I like those two. Let's leave on those. I actually had I had Jalen Carter for Alvarado, just like two huge guys who Jose Alvarado can sort of flash with his stuff. Like he's just absolutely filthy when he is locating his pitches. And Jordan Davis too. Like a couple of those sacks last year were just, I mean, they took your breath away. They were such amazing plays, right? So that's where I went there.
So the last thing I'll get into today, and this is Phillies Eagles related, but also the other Philly sports teams, is it was announced last week that John Middleton and the Phillies are getting involved in the proposed South Philly project where Xfinity Live currently is. That kind of redoing the stadium complex. The renderings look impressive, and the Phillies are involved. And it was proposed to Jeffrey Lurie this week at the league meetings. Are the Eagles involved? And he says they're always in conversations with Comcast and with the Phillies. They're kind of partners in the stadium complex, if you will, but the Eagles aren't involved now in that. And they have like 8 to 9 years left on their lease, and they have to do what's best for the Eagles. So this ties into a mailbag question we did not get into yesterday, but yeah, I'll open the floor to you. How do you see kind of the Eagles' part in the South Philly complex, and what intrigues you about this?
Well, I think what intrigues me, Zach, is that you have a situation where the Phillies have teamed up with the Flyers essentially in this sort of PR war against the Sixers, right? The Sixers have been pretty adamant that they want to move to Center City, to Market Street, like the Fashion District area right now. And that proposal is, I think, as the Sixers probably knew when they just announced it. Well, maybe they didn't know because they didn't alert the surrounding communities. A little bit of a PR gaffe there. That it's very controversial, right? And getting stadiums built in really any big city at this point is controversial. From where are you getting the funding from? How is it going to affect the surrounding areas? Which I think is kind of the more pressing issue here, where it's like, do we need 2 arenas? Those type of things. What does it do to Chinatown and the surrounding areas? So as you have had the Sixers make this push, and again, their lease, I think, ends in 2030 for the Wells Fargo Center. And by the way, like as somebody who's covered the Sixers, I will say, I do understand why they want their own building. Like they want to make money off of it first off, but the Wells Fargo Center also, Zach, in terms of modern arenas, yeah, they have redone the concourses and the fan experience is not quite as bad. The stuff on the arena level, it's pretty bad compared. I haven't been in every hockey arena at this point, but for a basketball facility, there are places like I went to Sacramento a couple times over the past couple years, and it's just wild how much better their facilities are, how much better their new building is. But anyway, you have this PR war now, right? And it's, the Phillies and the Flyers are trying to build this kind of huge, ambitious project that they have proposed where, it's like hotels, it's, I think there's like a concert venue involved, apartments. They're trying to revamp all of the parking lots in the South Philly Sports Complex. And it's, we'll see if they can get that through. Again, I think that's also going to be controversial if they move forward with it. But I guess the good reason to talk about it here is that the one team that is down there that has not picked a side yet, Philadelphia Eagles, right? And Lurie gets asked about it the other day, and I'm curious what he thinks about it, right? Because like you and Bo talked about, the Linc is, I think the Linc is in much better shape than the Wells Fargo Center is, but you see stadiums that are built around the same time as the Linc are getting revamped, those type of things. I'm curious to see how Jeffrey Lurie, how the Eagles, their business side, views all of the stuff going around them, and then also what's going on with the Linc as well.
Yeah, that's really good insight there. Because so a few things. First off, the Sixers Arena project. I understand that's a nuanced discussion for and
Very, very nuanced.
it's a debate that would take far more time than like what we'll get into here. I mean, I could say as someone who used to work at Eighth and Market, that I would love to see that area revitalized, right? And I would love to see that area have become a destination, which it certainly is. It's not now here, but it's not the moment. But I understand there's a lot of nuance involved, and I also think that I agree with what you said about like the fact that the Wells Fargo is a multi-purpose arena and the best NBA arenas now. I've been reading a lot about what the Clippers are building, and I was down the street the other day from the Pacers.
You read about
arena.
all the bathrooms that they're building there?
Yeah,
Steve Ballmer
yeah.
is absolutely locked in on being able to go to the bathroom quickly and get back to your seat.
Yeah,
He's been
and
bragging about that.
I heard it's almost going to be like like theater lights almost, where you're not walking around the concourse during the game. You're at your seats, and that and just it behooves the Sixers to want a place where they can own and operate, that they have the preferred dates, and that it's built for basketball viewing. And a lot changes with arenas over 30 years. You can retrofit them, but there's a lot of advances in technology and stadium architecture, things of that nature. That said, I understand this is like a nuanced discussion, and I'm not educated enough to certainly get on here to give my opinion of like all the dynamics at play. The Eagles thing,
we're just laying out, this side wants this, that side wants this, and really kind of what this means for the sports complex moving forward.
Sure.
So go ahead with the Eagles thing.
So then the Eagles part of it, it's fascinating. And the fact that they're not picking a side in this, the stadium complex the Eagles are a part of it, of course, right? And tailgating is a big part of the football game day experience.
Huge part.
That said, the Eagles are the biggest ticket in town. I mean, they're the team above all else. Like as I know Comcast and the power that it has, and the dates that the arena fills, and then the Phillies have more dates there. The Eagles are the biggest team in town, and so the fact that Jeffrey Lurie referenced when that lease ends, and Bo and I spoke about it the other day, and that was an interesting slip in here. And it's pretty soon to, or it's pretty early to kind of speculate about what they're going to do. But similarly, football stadium architecture has evolved during the 20 plus years that the Linc has been open, or the 20 years that the Linc has opened. And I think football is a little different than, it's a lot different than basketball, just in terms of the volume of people who are coming to the games. Like you're a 70,000 seat stadium in Center City is different than a 20,000 seat arena. Yeah. So, but as far as like a big part of this too, and if you've been to New England and you see the Patriot Place, and like the fact that they own and operate the retail and the restaurants around the arena, and I said this the other day, like what the Braves have down in Battery Park is a big part of kind of like how the Braves have grown here, and it's something that a lot of teams are looking at. And I think, but in terms of stadium architecture, like you go to Los Angeles and you see that stadium, it's a lot different than what's in Philly now. The Lincoln Financial Field, it was built during a period of time when you look at stadiums like the Eagles Stadium and the Steelers Stadium, right? The Ravens Stadium. It was during that period. Stadiums now like the Vikings and the Rams, the Bills are working on a new stadium here. The Titans are working on a new stadium here. They're different types of buildings, different types of experiences. So this is all a way of saying is that my radar's up about what the Eagles are going to do. I think if the Eagles kind of lent their support to that project, that would be huge for that South Philly area. Just the dates that the Flyers and the Phillies have, you're going to be down there. The football attending experience is different, but I think the Eagles are the huge wild card in this stadium's complex debate.
Well, and especially too, how many years did you say were left on the Eagles lease?
So Jeffrey said 8 or 9 years. I would need to. So they moved in what? They moved in 2003. And so I would have to see if it was a 30-year lease.
Maybe it was 30. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but nonetheless, this is like, this isn't 20 years away. We know that,
Yeah. And frankly, Zach, when the Sixers, I think they have 10 years left on their lease. They had like 9 years, I think, at least, when they announced their plans to try and build this arena in Center City. I think it's something that probably we'll hear about in the next couple of years, because when you have decisions, that are this big and involve, these huge stadium structures and all of this construction, you can't like say it a year before the lease ends. So I'm sure the Eagles are behind the scenes kind of deliberating their, what their options are, and we'll see. But they're going to be a part of this, I think, because it's like you said, they are the most important team in this town. And I think that has a chance to kind of change the discussion on a lot of things, especially if you have these three teams that are joined together on this project, including the biggest ticket in town. So just something to keep an eye on.
And the last thing I would add there is a big difference, of course, between the Eagles, the Phillies for that matter, and then the Sixers is the Eagles are the primary tenant of, Lincoln Financial Field. The Phillies are the primary tenant of Citizens Bank Park. The Sixers are not the primary tenant at Wells Fargo Center, or at least they would be quick to tell you that's the case. But no, this is something that is definitely on my radar for sure. Rich, this has been a fun 3 days. It's each show has gone by quicker than we kind of mapped out, which is a good sign. And love talking football with you. Look forward to doing it again. We are going to be back on Monday with Bo. And when we're back on Monday, it is April 1st. And I point that out because it's April 1st. It is, it's April Fool's Day. So please pray for me, because who knows what Bo's going to.
There's going to be some surprises in store for you.
But the reason I brought up April 1st is it's draft season, right? And we're going to go deep into the draft. So the place to turn is the PHLY Eagles show. Hit the like button. We will hear from Rich hopefully before then. Rich, thanks for joining us this week. This has been awesome.
Been a lot of fun, man.
Brenna, thanks for your help today. And we will see you on Monday. Hope everyone has a great weekend. Enjoy Phillies opening day. Enjoy Phillies opening weekend. Bo would say, as always, we love you. I would say we'll do better tomorrow. But this time, I'll say we'll do better on Monday. Thanks for watching.
We all silly like the mayor.